everyone. Welcome to our July webinar for the Innovators in Analytical Chemistry Education series. It's my pleasure to introduce Betty Galarreta from the Pontifical Catholic University of Peru. She's been a colleague of mine on the Analytical Division's Committee for Education for the last 5+ years. And so I'm really excited for her presentation. I'm also going to be dropping into the chat a link to a manuscript that Betty co-authored with several other analytical chemists around the country for Analytical and Bioanalytical Chemistry's ABCs column about how analytical chemistry is taught in different places around the world. And we'll hear from some of the other participants in that paper later in the summer. Patricia Forbes is also going to speak in September. And I'll also put a link in the chat to register for the August webinar, which will be Chris Harrison, who just won the Giddings Award from the American Chemical Society for analytical chemistry teaching. But if you've already signed up to get the links for all of the series, you don't need to register separately. So without further ado, I want to welcome Betty so she can tell us about her experience teaching analytical chemistry via interdisciplinary and international project-based learning. Thanks, Betty.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you also to Babik and you for the invitation. It's nice for me to show you a little bit of what we have been doing in the last couple of years. So first of all, let me tell you where I'm from. I live in Lima, Peru. So if you don't know, it's in South America, and we are one of the few capitals in the world that it's right on the coast, on the Pacific coast. So this is part of Lima, and Lima has, it's a huge city, 10 million people living there. We have a lot of history and a lot of tradition. So right in the middle of the city, you can find a pyramid from ancient times. And we are very proud also of all our history, biodiversity. And right here in Lima, we have our university where we live together also with part of this history. So right in the middle of our campus, we have part of the Incas Trail as well. So this is where I'm from, but let me also put you in context of what I'm going to share with you. So first of all, I would like to tell you a little bit of this experience of the article that Michelle was mentioning on how it's teaching analytical chemistry in different parts of the world. So in our case in Peru, how similar, but also how different it is from anywhere else. And then I will tell you my experience about teaching analytical chemistry lab with a project-based approach, adding these interdisciplinary flavors to the project and experiencing with international learning. So to put you in context, our first difference is how our academic year runs. So for most of you in the North Hemisphere, it will be a little bit different because for us, well, summer is January, February, and our first academic year will go from March to July, and the second one, so the fall semester, will be from August to December. So there are around 7 programs that teach undergraduate chemistry programs in Peru. Most of our students will start college or university once they are 17. And they have to take a minimum of 200 credits, study for 5 years with 2 semesters, and each semester must be at least 16 weeks long. So there is a slight difference with the States and probably some countries in Europe. But this is also very common for many places here in the region. So specifically talking about analytical chemistry, most universities will have between 3 or 4 lecture courses. So credits might be defined slightly different from places to places, but for us, the government has set a credit. It's set as a specific number of hours, depending if it's a lecture course or if it's something practical. So there are 9 to 16 credits for lectures and 6 to 8 credits for lab courses. And in addition, they could take also some elective courses that might be to further go beyond what is mandatory for analytical chemistry. The topics we cover from qualitative, quantitative, and instrumental analysis, and they would take it mainly from the second to the fourth year. And in the fifth year, they will probably choose an analytical chemistry project in order to do their undergraduate thesis all over the year. So with that in mind, let's go for this first story that I want to tell you. It's teaching analytical chemistry lab with a project-based approach. And we start working with having these key questions. What do we want from our students? We want to improve not only their technical skills, but also to be conscious in order to develop problem solving, teamwork, communication, work ethics, critical thinking, and chemical literature skills. So this is what we want from all of them. Why it's important? Because we want to help them to understand deeply what is the importance of designing an experiment, doing this time management and specialized articles, read these articles to formulate and reformulate the hypothesis. So typically before we did some sort of upgrade of our curricula, most of the time in analytical chemistry labs, they will follow a recipe. And we wanted to change that. So we wanted to achieve these goals by implementing this project-based approach in the analytical chemistry and instrumental analysis lab, as well as in other areas of chemistry like organic chemistry. So the ideas behind that, it was followed by some of the articles and also news that came out of what industrial employers wanted from the employees. They not only prioritize their technical skills, but also these other professional skills. The survey that we did with Michelle and some other fellows, they also talk about this future career preparation. And we also wanted to have the students be more motivated and more enthusiastic about doing a project and how it's going to be building everything from zero. And we also wanted to consider this enhancing learning by improving process skills in STEM, the ELIPS project that it's online. So with that, my first approach was to change a little bit these two lab courses that I teach. I don't teach the full courses. I teach half of the Analytical Chemistry 2 lab, where we teach about UV-Vis spectroscopy, fluorescence, atomic absorption spectroscopy, and some optical properties of nanomaterials. And the second course that will be following the first one is the Instrumental Analysis Lab. And I only teach part of it, it's only 20 hours, and I focus to develop the skills to learn how to use X-ray fluorescence, FTIR, and Raman spectroscopy. So with these two courses, one after the other one, these were the space where I was able to build this project-based learning approach. So how it was? So first of all, the students will have to choose a topic of their interest, and they will have to look into all the literature that we have, all the materials that we have available on the chemistry storage room, and all the equipment available, and they will propose something. And I give them some liberty in order to choose whatever they want to do, as far as we have the materials, we have the equipment, and we have the time, because they have a specific time frame that they will work in 3 sessions for this proposal, and then they'll have to be trying to overachieve and to be so ambitious that it will be a thesis project. It's only a short project, but they have this full liberty as far as they use at least one of these spectroscopic techniques that I told you on the first course. So that was the first one. Then they will do a first trial in terms of the proposal. They will do the sample preparation. They will get preliminary results. Most of the cases, their hypothesis won't be as they were planted. They were thinking, but this was a general idea. They will discuss the data. Then that will mean that perhaps they they collected more data than they will need, but it's part also of the project-based approach. And then they will reformulate, and perhaps the original proposal might change because, as I said, they wanted to overachieve in such a short amount of time, but that's also part of the learning process. So after this interaction, 3 interactions that they have, that they will do sample prep and they will do the analysis, they will have an oral presentation in front of all their peers. And this will be in order to analyze, to criticize, to develop more of this critical thinking. And I try to promote in these cases that they will have some sort of peer evaluation. And I put them like, think about it as if you were your reviewer of the manuscript that you're going to write. So how will you suggest some improvements of this topic? So with this, after this presentation, they have a short 1 week basically to make any further experiment that they might need. And then they will present their final work, that it's a manuscript, and I ask them to write it as if it's a manuscript from a journal of analytical chemistry. And they could come to get some feedback from me, and then they will have a self-evaluation and also a co-evaluation of their peers in the proposal. So some key aspects that we have to consider in order to get the final marks. I also promote to have a discussion with them what this project means at the very beginning, once I presented to them what they are going to do. And I tell them, okay, I want to mark all these different aspects. And now let's have a chat in terms of what do you think it should have what is the weight that each of the different aspects should be considered. So the proposal is only 5%. Experimental work has most of the weight of the final mark, and then we will have this manuscript, the analysis of results, the peer evaluation, the self-evaluation, and the oral presentation. So this might change from year to year, but most of the cases is very similar. So as I said, we have almost 3 weeks to work into that. They have the proposal, and I learned by experience that it's better to give them quite at some time. So I asked my colleague that teaches the other half of the first course to give me 1 week between his time or her time, just to present the proposal, just to present this project, what they are going to do. And then from there, they have 3 weeks to look into the literature, to go to the chemistry storage room, to go and to look into the instruments that we have, and to propose finally what they are going to work for the whole lab sessions. So this is more or less how it goes. Each group will be 2 or 3 students, and then at the end we will get this assessment and feedback of their work. So these are some of the examples of what my students have come from 2022 to 2025. And some of them are really interesting because they wanted to go, for example, in this case, as I said, we have a lot of history and cultural heritage in our country. So we went in an alliance with a university museum, and we have some English pottery that was stated here. So they decided to study, in this case, it was part of the second lab course, where they analyzed by XRF, by Raman, and FTIR, the different potteries that they have over there, and trying to find similarities and differences and what they can do. Then we also have a project with a local farm that they wanted to study and to discriminate honey from different methods using UDVs. We have also some other students that one of them have a farm, and they were able to analyze using FTIR, XRF, and Raman the different kinds of eggs, and to see, for example, that some sort of discrimination analysis using these techniques. And 1 year also, my students wanted to add the green chemistry effect, and then they wanted to use these polyphenols, but using local plants like coca leaves and moye. So in order to implement this method, a spectrometric method to determine iron. And then also some other students wanted to go more into pharma and trying to find a UVV's model using a multilinear regression analysis to discriminate paracetamol when aspirin present. And last year, paper about the content of metals in tampons led them to propose this project using sanitary pads instead and using XRF, FDIR, and Raman. So as you see, there has been a very diverse sort of topics, and all these examples were actually go beyond the class, because although they only have 3 sessions to work into that, the students really got so much involved into it that they wanted to continue. And we have a call also for small projects to promote research in undergrad students. So if they want, they could work onto that over the summer, and they submitted then this work as an abstract, and they presented as posters at the ACS. So these are just some pictures of some of my students working in the University Museum and using the XRF, portable XRF to analyze the pottery. And these are two of my students also presenting some of their works at the ACS General Meeting. So the student assessment about their work in this case showed them that they really want to learn a lot from this activity. I see that they were really involved. As I said, they wanted to continue to work beyond the class after there were no marks involved, only for pure pleasure of learning and to discover things. And they believe also the project was challenging, but it was also worth it. So this was really motivating. What I see also, as I said, they have the first lab course and then the second lab course. For the second lab course, I also teach that course, and I saw them that they already knew what to do. So they got this feeling of, okay, how am I going to build this project for the second course? It was not only to use only one spectroscopic technique, they have to use FDIR, XRF, and Raman, even if at the end they might not use all of them, but I want them to learn and to see what they can do it. So there were several skills that I think I was able to develop with them. One of the skills that was very challenging for them was time management, because, as I said, they proposed something very ambitious, but at the end they didn't have enough time to do it, and that was also part of their learning process. Now, thinking also in terms of the sustainable development goals, I think also our projects were able to at least tackle 4 or 3 of them. First, quality of education. We are trying to improve it on this way, doing this project base. We wanted to have more involvement, not only chemists working with chemists, but also how industries, museums, and other our community gets involved into that. So promoting this sort of innovation and infrastructure. And finally, promoting also these partnerships to achieve those goals. So this is part of my second story on how to teach analytical chemistry with an interdisciplinary project. So I also teach a course that is called Experimental Chemistry, and it's a lecture course that also have a lab, but I don't teach that. And this is a second year course where we look mainly equilibrium in all these ways. So acid-base equilibrium, electrochemistry, solubility problems, all of these different ways how equilibrium is analyzed using analytical chemistry. So what we decided to do is to connect my course that is mainly focused in analytical chemistry with Organic Chemistry Lab 1 that is part of the third year. And here I really thank my colleague, Dr. Patricia Gonzalez. She's the one that takes care of this course. And we also wanted to involve a third course that is called Integrated Project, and it's part of the third year program of gastronomy that we have in the university. And here we have my two colleagues, Maria Jose Jordan, that is a well-known chef, and Maria Teresa Bayon, that is a forest engineer that also works in this department. So how we were connected in these three courses, because first, I will look into different principles of equilibrium, all the different ways we have equilibrium. My colleague in the organic chemistry lab, she will look into the extraction process. My colleagues in gastronomy, they will look into the development of macerates and drinks. And with that, we develop a project together that is, would you like a vermouth? So my colleague in organic chemistry, she will focus on the extraction of caffeine. And I will ask my students to look, okay, what are all the different kinds of equilibrium that you can see in this extraction process of caffeine? And the peers in gastronomy, they actually do this once they start preparing a macerate and fermented drinks to do finally this well-known drink known as vermouth. So we start working together with this project. So each of us have their own goal, but at the same time, we can have this sort of interaction and we start seeing how we can connect different things. So our timeline of work, as I said, our semester lasts 16 weeks. So on week 3, we basically introduce the different topics on each of our classrooms. And then we will have the first interaction where everybody will visit the organic chemistry lab. So far my students here, they're going to be chemistry majors, but they only have seen very basic stuff. So although they might have some lab sessions, they don't know really how it is going to be being a chemistry major or chemistry student, doing long labs in organic or physical chemistry or in organic chemistry. So only visiting was a full experience for them, and also to realize that what they are learning in the lectures is actually applied for this future course that they will take the following year. And the gastronomy students were so amazed to see all these different equipment and how they could correlate that with whatever they do in the kitchen, that it was really also a really good experience. For the organic chemistry lab students, it was also a really good way for them to show their communication skills, because they have to explain what they are doing to younger fellows, also chemists, but they also have to communicate what they are doing to people that they haven't studied at all any science beyond high school. So this was a really nice experience. So we do that. We visit this organic chemistry lab. We do this first interaction. And then on a second interaction, we go to the kitchen. Let's see how we usually prepare a macerate. How do you do it? How do you mix this herb with this herb? Why is that? So they give us some sort of a workshop in order to see what were the right combinations and how we should do it. And my students also from the analytical chemistry perspective have to get what were the equilibriums present and what sort of calculations they could do into that. Then on week 12, they will prepare this macerate, have waited for all those weeks, and now we will prepare a vermouth, a signature vermouth with all the different plants that they mix on week 7 or 8. And then finally, we will get the self-evaluation. In the meantime, my students will share their experience of all these different equilibriums that they've seen and they observed in these 2 visits. And then that was the way how they were able to participate and take an active approach. So these are some of the examples of the experience, and And here you can see, I mean, some of the mixtures that they prepare for my students was basically doing some calculations and the equilibrium distribution of a macerate with caffeine. They have to calculate that. And they were sharing together. So this was a first pilot that we ran in 2023, and we have continued doing this sort of activity. So the assessment from our chemistry students, most of them enjoy it. And for some of them, they didn't think it was too much work because, as you've seen, it's just a first experience looking what everyone else is doing, and then for them doing some calculations. But it also opens their eyes to see what else I can do as a chemist. I can work in a kitchen. I can work in some food industry. I can work in winery and some others. So they learn, it allows them to solve some problems in an interdisciplinary context. It helped them also to learn without interacting. As I said, I learn more than without interacting with peers from other majors. So they feel really that they learn in a different way. So this was some of the assessments that they have seen. This let me also tell you the last story is how to teach analytical chemistry when an international project. And for this, I want to thank my colleague, Dr. Carmen Valdez Gutierrez. She's also Peruvian, but she worked for very many years in Florida Southern College. And we decided to have a COIL experience. COIL stands for Collaborative Online International Learning. And here we want to improve the international partnerships, that how technology, we know after COVID, we all have to start working only virtually, but how we can go a little bit beyond that and doing this, having this cross-cultural communication and promoting teamwork. So both of our institutions have chemistry programs. And in the case of Florida Southern College, it's a comprehensive college with approximately 35 chemistry majors, and it's also an ACS approved program. And in our case, it's a private nonprofit comprehensive university with approximately 73 chemistry majors. And we don't have ACS approved because we are outside the States. But we are also working getting this global recognition that ACS has now. So how we build our COIL? Let's start from the beginning. My university have this initiative to train all faculty to promote more of this collaborative online international learning. And this was part of the initiative of internationalization of my university. So they gave us some guidance, some mentorship, some workshops, model classes, how to do this teaching and learning, identify, and also they will help us also to identify some collaborators if we didn't have a partner abroad. But in my case, I knew Carmen long before, so that's how we start collaborating and doing this project. So we have run this COI project 2 times. For both times, Carmen used her forensic chemistry elective course, where in most of the cases, she will have 6 to 8 students, and that they will go from second year to fourth year. In my case, the first time, I was also teaching an elective analytical chemistry applied to forensic science, but the second time, I was not teaching this, but I wanted to use still my instrumental analysis lab. So although my students have their own project, as I said, that I change everything, I want them also to have the experience to have this sort of interaction with foreign students. So there are more or less 6 students from second year to fourth year for the elective, and for the instrumental analysis lab, they were from third year. So on our first trial, that was in 2022, we have this first introduction of the students online. So we both and all of the students recorded a small video only to introduce themselves and to know what were their interests. As I said, they all were taking this forensic course in Peru or in the States. And on that way, we were going to build the different groups so that each team have to have at least one member from Peru, one member from the States. It could be more. And they will choose their own teams, and then we will let them read the bias hunter and everything. We wanted to have some sort of discussion with all of them, first in an asynchronous mode, but also it could be later on synchronous. And we also have some common speakers into the class. So we wanted to run this all over the semester. Although our semesters in the States and in Peru were not exactly starting at the same time, we tried to overlap on those weeks that we did. And we use Mira platform in order to do all our activities. So as I said, first the introduction, then the discussion about this reading lecture. Then we also uploaded some of the videos of the guest lectures that we have. And we give them some task on what we would expect them to do in order to build a project. So they have to choose a project of their election. So these were the 3 projects that they selected about fingerprint drugs and the use of Raman spectroscopy, postmortem evaluation of ethanol and related metabolites, and the use of Malditos MS to analyze soil with contaminated materials. So week after week, they will have to do this literature review, and they will have to discuss in different moments on their own schedules how they were going to, what approach they were going to take, what will be their input, how things are done in Peru instead, and how things are done in the States for all these different analyses, looking into the forensic perspective, because not all of them will have the same protocols. And then they will have some sessions where we will use our own lectures to have this interaction. So the benefits for the students, it gives them a global perspective in terms how different they are, but at the same time, how similar they are. They develop these skills in terms of teamwork and doing this collaboration. And I always give them as an example, this interaction that I have with Michelle and my other colleagues of the international committee, because this was really a motivating way how things seems they were going to go from now on, now that we have this pandemic, and after the pandemic, how things were moving. So they have to work also in terms of problem solving, creativity, and innovation, how they are going to present their work. And the communication, let me tell you, my students were forced sort of to improve their English communication skills, because they are natively, as well as me, as we are Spanish speakers. But it also helped them to keep improving these English communication skills. Inclusivity and belonging was also something that they developed. Some of the groups really work well as teams. They do this intercultural. They have this intercultural experience without leaving their own places. So this was really motivating. And this also helped them in order to get some career advancements. For us and for our university, it helped us with internationalization. It was a low-cost global engagement because not many students could afford to travel and to have an internship abroad or take courses in a semester in other countries. From a pedagogical point of view, was also really nurturing to have this communication with Carmen. Although we knew each other long before, we still were not able to see how each of us teach, so the different ways of teaching, and potential new areas of collaboration in research was also a benefit of all these activities. The students of assessment for this first trial, they do believe they develop international collaboration. This project encouraged them to have this interaction. But they also suggest what can help to improve this objective is to schedule a space just to talk about the project. And this was one of the things that we wanted to change later on, because we have time for our lectures and we propose this project, but we have to think on all the extra time the students need in order to match their schedules, considering they are in different countries and they have different time zones, and they also they are more or less busy, so we have to consider that as an improvement. But they also think that they develop this, that get into how international students work and study. And for me, it was an opportunity to think out of the box and adapt myself into other people's teamwork styles. So this was also the opinion of one of our students. In terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and respect, they believe that, yes, this project has helped them. I believe everyone was included and everything was equal throughout the project. So for them, it was fine. Suggestions for future COIL projects, more strict tracking on the progress of the project, because I feel that it was forced the students to communicate and move forward with the work. So as it was different styles of how we teach our courses, not all of them were used to. So this was also part of the challenges that they faced. And some of them also suggested to start the project earlier to have more time to elaborate the presentations. So on our second run, we have these ideas on ways how to improve it. But as I said, I was not able to teach the elective course, and I implemented my instrumental analysis lab. So we have 3 groups in this case, and they were not going to work in the same project. The way how we wanted to do this this collaboration was to have the students from PUCP, from my university, serve as consultants, because they were the ones that were using the equipment and have hands-on the equipment in the Raman, in the FTIR, in the XRF. But the students in the States, they didn't have a lab exactly in that course. It was only a lecture course. So they only knew what they have read, and some of them might taken already some instrumental analysis labs, some of them might not. So Peruvian students were the consultants, and the Florida students provide feedback to the PUCP students about their projects. So there were some sort of additional peers to evaluate the projects that they have. But at the same time, the PUCP students were able to give them feedback in terms of how they could propose their forensic project. So this was the way how we ran this second time the project. But we also have some difficulties this year, because there were so many strikes that year in Peru that some of our activities have to be postponed. And if you remember, last year, Florida had to face also some hurricanes and some weather problems that they also have to postpone some of the activities. But still, we tried to manage it. We did our best. And the assessment, it was that for most of them, they considered that the collaboration was very or somewhat effective during the research development. The overall experience is that they do consider interactional collaboration is important for their education, and that this activity encouraged them to have respectful dialogues and collaboration between people from different cultural backgrounds. They also help them to understand how students from different countries approach the same academic subject differently. And now they are more aware of how to address cultural differences in verbal or non-verbal communication. We asked them also, what do they consider to be the primary benefit of collaborating with international teams? And we give them just a list of these options. And from all of them, most of them mark that the primary benefit was to access to diverse expertise and perspective, to expose them to different research methodologies and to expand their professional networks. And we also ask them, what are the main challenges that they have faced when collaborating with international teams? And as we knew, time zone differences, language barriers, and difficulty coordinating schedules and meetings. So this is not exactly the most surprising thing. We have seen that this is also some of the problems that we faced before. We are trying to find new ways how to tackle this and to overcome these barriers. But this is something that I believe it's really encouraging for our students. So I would like to wrap up all these ideas with what are the challenges and opportunities in teaching analytical chemistry via an interdisciplinary and international project-based learning. So first, I would like you to keep in mind to consider community-based learning and service learning projects, where projects can have a strong impact in the community. As you see, the students were really motivated, but I think it will be even more motivating to have this impact in the community. And I would like to bring back the idea that Chuck Lucy mentioned on the first talk of this series of seminars, that is holistic approach is really important. Also, to encourage students to continue their work and to submit it as part of an undergraduate poster or a minor proposal, it's also something that is a really good benefit of this project-based learning. As I said, my students finished their lab courses, and then after that, they wanted to continue. And it was really encouraging for them to know that their work will be printed in a poster, presented at a conference, that they know now what are the tools to present a small proposal, even though it's not much money, but it will give them something for them to learn from experience. Also, I would like to tell you that some of the challenges and opportunities is also to improve the students' perspective about the scope of their work and how fruitful and how benefit it could be once you start looking these problems with an interdisciplinary and intercultural approach, working with the students from gastronomy, from archaeology, from the States, from other places. It really opens their mind. It gives them a really broad perspective, what they can do with all the tools that they know and they learn, how to see things from a different perspective. It's really amazing for them. Finally, to promote international collaborations and provide more student interaction opportunities to enrich their learning process. I think this is also something that we have to consider, to give them these opportunities to our students. Perhaps we will have a connection with other universities where they could spend some time abroad. Not everybody can do it, but maybe this sort of COIL approach could have some benefits also to all the different classes and lectures. Finally, I would like to acknowledge to all of you for listening to me, and also to all my students from all the different lecture courses that I taught in these last couple of years, to my collaborators, Patricia Gonzalez, Carmen Valdez Gautier, Maria Teresa Bayón, and Maria Jose Jordan, for all their help in teaching all these crazy courses. Milagritos Jimenez, who's the director of the museum, Josefina Ramos de Cox, that I mentioned before, and also to the School of General Studies and the School of Science and Engineering, as well as the School of Gastronomy at my university, and to the Department of Science, the chemistry section where I'm from. So with that, I would like to thank you and happy to answer any question, comment, or concern.
Thanks so much, Betty. Any questions for Betty? I was wondering, Betty, it seems like in a lot of your teaching, you're collaborating with other faculty. And I was wondering if you had any tips for how to do that effectively. Sort of one thing to build out space in the class schedule for the students to collaborate, but then I know that also behind the scenes, you're probably spending a lot of time working out the planning with your colleagues. So I wonder if you could offer a little bit of advice about that.
Yeah, I mean, in most cases, it starts just by serendipity, sort of like we know before each other, but it's really important to know if you work with colleagues from your own school, you might have the challenges in order to know what are the schedules for the different courses. So it's a little bit easier because at least you have the time zone set. But still, it's important because I don't know how it is in your university, Michelle, but here in mine, although we are in part of the same university, each school runs their own way, how they schedule some activities and how flexible they might be. So this is also something important to look into that. So we plan ahead. The first pilot, in most cases, just having at least the same time and day for some of the course lectures. And that actually helps them because at least it's easier for them to move without asking so many permissions and on that way. And the other thing that it's important to consider also is do not forget what are the goals that you want to achieve at the end from your own course in that way.
That's
And
great advice.
always be kind because I mean it's trial and error in some cases. So with that, I think those are the main ones.
Thanks, Betty. Susanna, I see your hand too.
Hi, Betty. Oh my goodness,
Hi, Susanna.
congratulations. This was wonderful. I learned a lot from you. You're such an inspiration. Just out of curiosity, when they do the vermouth project, do they get to taste it at the end or yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. They tasted, okay, that we tasted. This is I know it's recorded, but it's just we we tasted and the gastronomy point of view. So they will have like the smell, right? And they will have all the different kinds of sense detection. And we did an improvement because what we can do is we can remove most of the ethanol from it if we cook it later on, right? So that's what we did for the following year. So what we did, it was, okay, we're going to cook with this vermouth and to see how it works. So for all of them that they were over, in our case, 18, then they were able to taste it. But otherwise, they could do the smell and then they could see the color if it was clean or not. So that was a way how to do it.
Thank you. And for the project-based learning, so the students who decide to continue on with the project because they're really interested, they can see their great results, and then they can take it to the next level. How do you accommodate that? Do you have time in your schedule? Do you have a lab available? Are there any challenges with that? Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky that there are not that many. So that's also something to consider. As I said, my classes are relatively small, so I most of the time I will accommodate it in my own research lab, but also as they will work in the summer, if I don't have the space or if I don't have the equipment, I will also accommodate them in the teaching labs. So that was the way how we did it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Betty? Great. I'm going to put the link to her publication in the chat, as well as the registration link again for Chris Harrison's talk, which will be our August webinar. And I'll send out to all the registrants the recording along with those links. And Betty, I might get from you as well live versions of some of the links you cited in
Yeah,
your slides as
sure.
well. So thank you so much, Betty. That was really fun. I enjoyed hearing about all the projects. Now I'm kind of amazed of all the work you've done with the committee, knowing how much you do with your teaching.
Oh, thank you, Michelle.
All right, so thanks everyone for being here, and I hope to see folks in August. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.